25% of all hospital admissions are due to falls, and according to Age Safe America, 40% of those hospitalized individuals will never return to independent living. Falls are a major threat to the independence of older adults. So that's why I'm excited to be joined today by Dr. Katharine Forth from Zebrio to dive deeper into this topic. But first, a disclosure. Before we begin, we'd like to note that today's guest, Dr. Katey Forth, is a co-founder of Zebrio. While this episode will explore a range of technology solutions related to fall prevention, we want to be transparent that one or more of the solutions discussed is associated with the guest company. Our goal is to provide balanced educational content, and other products, types, and considerations will also be discussed. And now, back to our conversation. Welcome to Innovative Aging, a podcast for clinicians who want to stay creative, stay informed, and stay connected to what's possible. I'm your host, Carol Chiang, an occupational therapist with 27 years of experience in rehab and home-based care. I know how hard clinicians work to keep their clients aging safely, whether that means hacking together solutions, testing new products, or thinking 3 steps ahead. If you're passionate about helping your clients function better, but just don't have the time to keep up with all the latest solutions, this podcast is for you. On Innovative Aging, you'll hear practical, energizing conversations with experts in rehab, design, and innovation that can spark fresh ideas you can bring back to the people you serve. Together, we can rethink what it means to age well at home and lead the way in shaping the future of aging. Let's dive in. Welcome, Katey. Can you tell us a
Thank
little
you
bit
so
about
much.
who you are and how you normally interact with clinicians?
Well, thank you for having me, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got a slightly unusual background, I think, for the world of healthcare. I'm a former NASA scientist, and we actually were doing a lot of research about the way the body can control itself with respect to balance. And while I was there, we invented the technology that actually is now the Zebrio technology. So my background is a little bit different. And when we're thinking about anything to do with health and the body, it's not just, is it out of the box thinking? It's out of this world thinking. So hopefully I can give a few more insights that are a little bit off the beaten track or maybe a little bit different than what you're used to. And the way that
Yeah.
I often interact with clinicians and patients is really giving cutting edge insights and just the latest science to help guide different care plans and opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, you know, falls are so multifactorial, right? And so having whatever data we can get in there and all that information is just stuff that helps a lot. I look at things from a clinician's point of view, so I kind of only see those muscular things like with people with too much sitting that end up losing muscles, or people with neuropathy, it's about sensation, they can't feel anything, or the Parkinson's patients who don't have reaction time, right? That can't like get their arms out in order to stop them from a fall. So it's really fascinating to me when you take in that, objective part of it and say, hey, like, here's some additional information that can really, build out that idea a little bit more and see how, like what the real big picture is of it. So for
Yeah.
me, it's really that fear of falling. So I'm really interested in how can I prevent falls, because I want people to not develop that fear. And I think that having tools in their background and in something that they can do every day is really beneficial to that. So I'd really like to hear about you. Like, why do you think these conversations are important to be having right now?
Yeah, I mean it's messy. Falling is a messy thing. As you say, multifactorial. There's over 21 risk factors for falling. And then we're obviously really focused on the balance component. Um, but even things like there's so many things that can affect your balance just throughout the day.
Yeah.
So your balance can change every day, as I'm sure you and your guests are very well aware of. But when you can start to measure those things, it becomes fascinating. Things like mood can change your balance. We know that there's some recent research that's come out about if you're if you're measuring someone's balance while they're listening to music that they enjoy, they will balance better than if they're listening to music that they don't enjoy. So the psychological aspect, of which you're talking about fear being, quite an extreme version of it, but the psychological aspect is just as important as all of the physical parts. But fear in of itself is a risk factor for falling. And let's just think a little bit about, well, what does that really mean when you have a fear of falling? We know that if somebody is fully capable and they balance really well and they have a fear of falling, that's definitely going to increase their chance of falling. And also, it's going to limit their life, it's going to limit the way that they move. Now, let's think about the high risk individual who's very, very vulnerable and they also have a fear of falling. Is that the same kind of effect? Is that as negative, or is that actually kind of protective? So, just that part alone, I think, really starts to illustrate the complexities with all the different risk factors for falling. You've got the physiological side, you've got the psychological side, and your body it uses so many different systems to be able to balance that it can be influenced for many, many things. And then when we get down to the nitty gritty of it all, it is just so layered with context and different, just so many different variations here for us to sort through the noise. So how do you sort through the noise? And part of what's happened is that in healthcare, it gets very binary of you've either fallen or you haven't fallen. You're somebody who has a full history or doesn't. And it helps people to kind of think about a patient in this, or separate out who to pay attention to. But in the end, it doesn't really help to identify all the people that need help, and then how do we guide them through? So I could talk at that at great length, but yeah, multifactorial and highly complex, and there's no pill for it. So
There's
what do you
no pill,
do?
yeah. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I love that you're talking about mindset right now because that is such a huge component of it, but one that's not recognized by Medicare. There's no checkbox for, what was your mood at the time, or how did you feel, or, you just lost your cat, it just died. I mean, of
Yeah,
course you're grieving, and these are things that will affect your ability, your physical ability. I mean, we're just not there yet, I think, as maybe a society to see the influence of psychology on our physical being. We look at just those markers and oh my gosh, like when you say binary, yeah, that's absolutely true, right? People
yeah,
start to think about themselves like that. They're like, I'm a fall risk. I could fall. I have fallen before. Like, but that's not who you are. That's who you were at that particular moment, that little
yeah,
pinpoint in time when those circumstances around you, when your environment was a certain way, your brain was a certain way, was that time of day. And to me, like that's a really big thing. That time of day issue is huge in that discussion because for me, I think about falling as really being something that you need to be considering when you have the highest risk of. So maybe that is in the morning and you're stiffer and so you're not moving as well. You don't know, right?
yes,
And it could be in the afternoon where there's a bit more of a problem because of fatigue. So looking at all of these things is
sure,
so important to be able to assess everything. So I think it's so true that balance is one of those things that's not fixed. It's not like weight on a scale that this is how much you weigh and this is how much it is from going forward. It's really about time frame and what your balance is at that time in on that day at that very moment under what circumstances. And I think that for me, I talk a lot to my patients about this, like looking at their balance as risk factors. So that your highest risk of falls are probably in the morning when you're stiff, you wake up, you're like your head's not quite moving around where your shoulders are, and you're not getting segmental motion that is a little bit better for balance, or your feet are hurting because your plantar fasciitis is like tightened up over the night. You know, to me, like those in conjunction with things like needing to rush to the bathroom, those add to your fall risk, which also are, influenced by different balance in first thing in the morning versus, by lunchtime, everybody's warmed up, they've moved around, their brain is awake, their balance is probably pretty good. And those are good times for them to do things that maybe require a little bit more independence. And then I would say like nighttime. Nighttime is one of those things where now it's not about the stiffness, it's about the fatigue. It's about all the things you did all day long. and how that is, now affecting like your ability to lift your leg all the way up or up
Yeah.
over the shower and those kinds of things. So yeah, I think there's such a big discussion that has to be around balance that is not what you see on like a clinician chart where it's like check yes or no or scale between 1 and 10. I mean, so many of these things have influence on them. And I
Mhm.
just keep going back to that mindset part because to me that's really, really important. And I'll tell you why. I have so many and I've never done research on this, so we really should do statistics to find out how many people fall after they go to see the doctor. Because it's amazing. Like it takes so much effort for these people who maybe have been in pajamas for 3 or 4 days, and now they have to get in the shower, make put on makeup, get their hair nice, and the caregiver's like, "Oh my gosh, you gotta get in the car now, and we have to do all these things," right? They're exerting themselves both physically, emotionally, mentally. They're trying to get prepared for this doctor's visit to remember all the things they wanna ask, and also sometimes, keep it together so that they're good. And yeah, I've had so many where they fell right outside the doctor's office. I've had them where they came home and just like, fell into a heap at home in their lazy
Mhm.
boy. Yeah, it's fascinating to me.
I mean, I think, you've touched on so many pieces there, and really to try and simplify it, when you think about, is this patient going to fall? We actually put it into a little bit of an equation, which is that is the environmental hazard greater than the physical capability? And
Neat.
both of those things actually encompass a lot. So, what's the environmental hazard? Well, it could be that you have to go to the doctors. That in of itself is the environmental challenge that you're in. You could be hiking in Uganda looking for gorillas. That's a real example from our clinical trials, which is just funny.
Neat.
And then you have that physical self side, which, of course, as therapists, you're acutely aware of. And this is where the balance piece sits. And you talked about fatigue. You talked about emotional and mental strain. You talked about the physical stiffness that you might get in the morning. There's so many variables and so many things that can affect you. But keep that in mind. Is the environmental hazard greater than the physical capability? So if you have a running back from an NFL team, are they going to fall in the next year? Well, if we put them on black ice and tell them to change directions at top speed, they're going to fall down. We can always make someone fall down, but does that mean they're at risk for falling? Then you take somebody who is very frail, very has very low muscle strength, and maybe they've got a vestibular disorder, and suddenly their physical self is a lot lower in capability, so it doesn't take much of an environment to trigger off a fall. So when we start thinking in these sorts of terms, it really helps to tease apart some of the falls that happen, because very often people just assume, well, a fall, that's an accident, you can't predict it. But it's no accident that falls happen for anyone. And we can, in fact, predict it. So that's the first thing. Then, over on the physical side of it, the balance piece, it can change throughout the day. And so, if you are, yes, stiff in the morning, those neurons haven't quite come online yet, then yes, you'll see people's balance is a little bit worse, and we can measure that. Different people have different reactions to different things. So we often term it as the 6 pillars of balance. We like to talk about these. It's a way to simplify the different influences to your physical self. Sleep being a big one. So we see that just one bad night's sleep can drop your balance up to 40%. I'm sure that's not surprising, but
No.
that wobbly feeling, it's a real thing. Fatigue, you talked about fatigue. That can be acute fatigue or it can be systemic fatigue. We actually did do a study with the University of Houston to look at quadricep fatigue, and that
Hmm.
didn't really hold. So we know that there needs to be some level of systemic fatigue that's also needed to be able to have um, a drop in your balance. So if you did a spin class, we can see a 10 to 30% drop in your ability to balance from doing that. So is going to the doctors, do you have to climb stairs? Do you have to get in and out of the car? Is that fatiguing? Does that fatigue you to the point that's affecting your balance? And then when you're leaving the doctor's office, is that in fact dipping you down to a point that you are much more vulnerable? And it very well could be. But I will just caution you to thinking, well, first thing in the morning, they're worse. Later in the afternoon, they're better, because different people actually do respond differently. And you've got your
Interesting.
larks and your night owls and things.
Ah,
So again, layer upon layer of complexity here. But when you can measure it, you can actually then understand, all right, well, my patient responds this way when they have a bad night's sleep. This is how they are in the morning, and this is how they are at night. And I'll just say one quick comment about nighttime, because we've had some people measuring in the middle of night,
huh.
and you think naturally, well, the light, there is no light at nighttime. It's dim. But we had these people turn the lights on, so it wasn't dim light that caused them to have worse balance. You could come up with different theories as to why their balance was dramatically worse in the middle of the night compared to during the day. And we've had a senior living group. This is assisted senior living group that we analyzed some data with them, that people who were in that moderate risk range, so not completely high risk, not low risk, but right in that moderate risk range, if they fell 88% of the time, it was at nighttime. So when you
Interesting.
start measuring people's balance, you can learn so much, because it is so noisy and there's so many influences. So when you can objectively quantify their balance, that's a meaningful measure of balance, not just, can I stand on one leg? But
Yeah.
is this
I
predictive?
I love what you just did there. You basically took it and you said, "Hey, it's about personalization." Like, it is not just AM and PM and stuff. I was
Right.
given a broad example, but you're absolutely right. If somebody is a night owl, they do better at night, right? Like, their risk
Okay.
of falling is different than somebody
Yeah.
else. And I think it's really fascinating too about checking your scores at nighttime as well, because that does teach you a lot of things. Actually, it teaches you when somebody takes it, when it's dark and they don't have the benefit of vision to be able to help with their balance, like, what is
Hmm.
their score? And what is their score when they have vision? Like, these
Yeah.
are the reasons why we make people close their eyes and,
Right.
take away some of those compensatory strategies that they may not even realize that they've been doing, and help them see, "Oh, okay, like, let's localize this. The problem is vestibular. The problem is muscular, the problem
Hmm.
is timing or emotional or whatever it is." So that's really,
Absolutely.
really interesting. That's
Yeah,
really
you never
interesting.
know what you're going to discover either. For the individuals, they get super excited because they had no idea, and how can they have an idea? Balance is quite a nebulous concept. Do you
Yeah.
know, Carol, how well you're balancing today?
I don't, and I wish I did. And that's the reason why I love this, because you're basically just providing a way to give objective data for other people to assess and say, like, "Oh, like, let's layer that upon, like, what my normal habits are, how I normally feel." So you have the objective stuff and then you have the subjective, and together that creates your big whole picture to
Right,
understand. I
that's
think
right.
that's Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because that technology is so much better at that objective measure. And I think, as a clinician, we're testing balance in the hospitals, or, in a clinical setting. People act differently in
That's
clinic than they act at home, right?
right.
They act differently, well, actually, I would say that we're all human. So my human eyes and my human abilities, reaction time to hit the stopwatch, like when the time is up, right?
Yeah,
These are all things that are prone to error. These are human error on my side that don't give you good data as a patient, right? But if you're in control of
right,
that, yeah, you have that
right. It's
real data
true.
to make real assessment.
Yeah, yeah, and then you have to start thinking about on tests. What is this test telling me? Because
Yeah.
every test tells you something. Is that information useful for you or not? And I'll use the time get up and go as an example, because you were talking about the timing of it. And that's that's a very, very common test. And I'm sure, most therapists use it. But what are they really using it for? What's the value you extract from that? Is it that binary determination of full risk? Because that cutoff number is different if you look in the literature. 14.5 seconds, 11.5. Different people have validated it at different numbers. So how meaningful is it? If you're a 13, are you good? Are you not good? Who knows? But as a therapist, I suspect, this is just a theory, I suspect that you get more information just by watching them and using your own eyes, because you've got very trained eyes to know what's going on here, and you can see things. And so I just encourage people to think about, why am I doing this assessment? What information is it giving me? And then is that going to help the patient for the intended goal? If it is for full risk, how can you determine, as I said, the time get up and go, it's actually only 33% accurate.
Oof.
I know, it's not great. So the value there is what you see, and I noticed that, he's not taking his eyes off the floor. Okay, why is that? We can help him with that. Or ankles aren't really bending. There's a lot of ankle stiffness. You start to get other piece of information that is highly valuable for the care plan. But in terms of actually identifying the people who are at risk for falling, and then determining treatment efficacy of your own treatment, what happens if they're not actually improving that time? Does that mean you haven't done a good job? But if it's only 33% accurate, what does that
Right.
mean?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's so true because it's not capturing any of the quality of the movement or the sequence of how they decided to do that gait, or,
Yeah.
you're missing so many other variables that you actually really need that are really important in looking at, how you can, like, what their level is, right?
Mhm.
It really isn't just a number. And as we've been talking about this entire podcast, right? It all depends. It's where they are, what time of day it was, how they felt, what were they thinking, So I completely agree. I love the ability to hand off like the data collection side to technology that has a better eye than I do, that can look at all of those things themselves and let me do the part that's human. Let me do the
Yeah.
part where it's about like putting it into context and helping using those, I don't know, observations to
Mhm.
ask the next question. Like, I noticed that
Yeah.
you're doing that. Is that something you do all the time? Or like,
Mhm.
what happens when you walk from like your bed to your bathroom? Like, do you have something to hold on to? Where is it? Do you notice that this is the kind of thing that happens? Right. So yeah,
Yeah.
those observations I think are actually way more gold than some of these other things that we're using right now.
Yeah, you're the detectives solving the case, and so why not get as much information that's as accurate as you possibly can? And in terms of resolution, you were getting to the point of resolution, which is, if you're looking at someone's gait with your eyes and you are
Yeah.
noticing that they are wobbly, that's good. That's it's obvious,
Right.
someone's wobbly. Can we get to deeper levels, high level of resolution, so we can now spot hidden risk and emerging risk,
Mm.
and these very subtle levels of risk that now provide a continuum. You can now stratify high, medium, and low. You can now see across a scale of 1 to 10 rather than just yes or no. And then you can say, okay, well, we're not out of the high risk range yet, but we've had dramatic improvement. There's been a 20% improvement with their balance. And again, I'm speaking from the technology that is Zebra, which actually has a score from 1 to 10 for balance, but that's predictive of whether you're going to fall down in the next 12 months. So
Mm.
when I say a meaningful measure of score, a meaningful measure of balance, if you're actually shifting your score, you're then reducing your probability of falling. And that's all published in medical journals. So it's the ability to see this higher resolution is fascinating. And we get so many surprises. We'll measure maybe it's a healthcare executive group. And I remember this one particular president, he had the whole room, head of rehab was there, everyone's watching, they'd measured themselves and done reasonably well. And he looked fit. He was like late 50s, and he scored not very good. And everyone's like, what's going on? What's happened? And then, of course, I'm wondering what's going on. And the president says, well, I had a spinal cord injury 5 years ago. I've still got numbness down my left leg. And there it is. It
Wow.
was hidden. None of them knew. They'd been working with him for years. Nobody knew. And so for patients, it's what aren't they telling you? And when you measure somebody, you want to have something that says, hey, hang on a moment, something's not right in this system. And then you can use your expertise to be that detective of like, okay, well, what is it that's happening? It's
Yeah.
again, revealing insights I love it.
I think that's really fascinating. And, data like that promotes curiosity, right? I mean, he must have looked at it and he already knew, but
Yeah.
at what point did he know? Like it was a little bit, I don't know, cloudy. Like he kind of knew that it was a problem, but he couldn't
Nebulous.
quantify and say like, okay, it's this much of a problem. It's a moderate effect on me. It's a minimum effect on me. And I,
Yeah.
I think, curiosity about where we are on that is actually something I think that could really motivate patients to be able to like want to do better. And like you were saying
Mhm.
before, people want to know like, am I getting better? Am I a little bit better or not? And currently when we're relying on clinicians to say, yeah, you're better than you were like last week because
Yeah.
you did 10 this week instead of 5. I mean, I think that's different than getting a blood test that
Yeah.
gives you numbers or,
Well, yeah,
objective.
I mean, you're trying to take the nagging out of it. You don't want
Yes.
therapists to have to nag them to do stuff. And then how do you validate it for them so that they they feel good about themselves in the whole process? If we're just expecting them to just trust your opinion, of course they should trust your opinion, but then, how far is that going to carry them in their motivation and compliance? We've seen that when people have measured themselves, so when seniors have measured themselves on our scale, that's where the technology is, um, and they've got open access to measuring themselves. Carol, we've seen a 74% reduction in falls with no intervention, like nobody
Love
talking
it.
to them. Just they saw their score and they started to connect the dots and many, many different things. And so, again, that's published data.
And they probably like did put in their own interventions because they were
Yeah,
aware. They started being more aware of doing other things in there. So it wasn't formal intervention that was necessary. It was just
right.
internal like agency that I'm like, "Oh, whoa, like I need
Yes.
to do something about this. I'm going to take
Enhance
the
self
stairs this time."
That's right. Enhance self-efficacy, enhance
Yeah.
self-regulation,
Yeah.
empowerment. So if you
Yeah.
can empower your patient, gosh, what burden does that take off you as a therapist? Because now they're more receptive and open to all the things that you want to guide them through and to help them. And we've seen also that in a physical therapy clinic, that when they have measured patients who are in the
Mhm.
lower quarter patients, that they actually shifted high risk patients. 50% of them shifted within 2 to 4 weeks of physical therapy. So
Wow.
how amazing is that to be able to have those data to show the patients, like, look at you, you're going up, you're out of the high risk zone, let's keep going. And how about being able to show that to your bosses or to any organization that you're a part of to say, this clinic is crushing it, we're doing great. And so to be able to quantify, there's so many reasons why this is helpful. It's for the individual patient. It's for the therapist to do that check-in. How are they feeling today? Because we know it does vary. Oh, they're on the lower end today. Something might be up. Let's talk to them about it. Oh, you've got
Yeah.
more back pain today. Interesting. It's just
Yeah.
so many levels. You've got patient, therapist, and then you've got that organizational level too.
And, what you're doing is giving them confidence in their own skills by seeing an objective number that doesn't depend on somebody else, that, oh, maybe they're just being nice and,
Yeah.
because they're saying that because they
Yeah.
want me to feel better. It's like, no, I can actually see the results for myself. I have confidence in myself. Therefore, I know that that I'm doing the right thing. And the more I do, the better I'm going to get. And
Yeah.
it's under my control. And I love that. I think right now, the biggest struggle that I see is this revolving door problem because,
Mhm.
clients fall and then that starts the cycle of clinicians in the home. Clinicians get
Settle
them
down.
ready, right? 4 weeks later, they're nice and strong. They're great. We're going to discharge. And the wife's
Yeah.
in charge of, doing the exercises. But of course, that's a power struggle you just put them into. And then they go back to their old habits. And then a few
Yeah.
weeks later, they're back on your schedule. So finding ways to, that feels so passive to me. It's very much like, here's the therapy you're going to do, and I'm going to give it to you versus
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do this for myself because I want to see if I can make that score go up, like gamification, right? Like
It is, and
being able to see that.
people get so competitive about it as well.
Oh,
If they're, in a clinic, they'll talk about their scores and they'll say, "Oh, what'd you get today?" And yeah, it's we're all competitive. We all want to
yeah.
be at perfect 10. So when you quantify it, it gives them something to measure and something to go for. And you started this whole podcast talking about fear of falling and the psychological element of it, and to be able to give that score, to be able to allow a patient to quantify for themselves, because
Yeah.
you're not there with a little clipboard saying, okay, well, based on all these things, you are now at this. It's like there is a cold hard number that pops up for you, and it sticks with people as well. We were at the National Senior Games in 2019, and we did screening of thousands of athletes, senior athletes. We went back 2022, so pandemic all happened. We went back, and don't we had multiple people come to us and say, "I scored a 4 last time. I want to see what I'm going to get this time." That's like years later. We've gone through a pandemic, so people want to know. They want to know.
Competition is like the best motivator. It's part of the reason why I really love group activities, group training, group, therapies that you can do virtually. If those caregivers, I understand those caregivers have a tough time trying to get people to do exercises on their own. So I'm usually like, look, there are virtual groups, exercise groups that they can do. Get them interested in a community, and they
Mhm.
can compete with each other, and they can do
Yeah.
things together, and it checks the box for social engagement as well. And I know there are lots out there. Just thinking, like, even Senior Planet, I think it's a free one based out of AARP, but like Team Vivo and Get Set Up, and
Mhm.
like lots and lots of virtual options out there if you go
Loads.
and search and get that community together, get the competition going. And it's competition with themselves as well. Like you said,
Mhm.
well, today's a 4. Okay, can I get like, something better next time around? And
Yeah.
it drives your motivation because you're thinking, you know what? It's actually just like weight loss, right? Like weight loss is so hard at first because it feels really frustrating. You don't feel like you can do it, but when you can see that 1% improvement every day, and then you start to say, "Well, can I break like this barrier or this goal and let me shift that goal again?" It's goal
Yeah.
setting. It's goal
Yeah.
setting, and it's empowering.
Yeah, we have when somebody can't stand for 60 seconds. So our test does require someone standing there for 60 seconds. And even though they're standing, we are measuring dynamic balance because it's so sensitive. Um,
Nice.
but those 60 seconds are actually really important for a couple of different reasons. The first is, as you said, you get people who are determined and I'm going to perform my best. Astronauts, classic for this. Space didn't bother me. And they stand there as still as they can. For 30 seconds, you can do that. After 30 seconds, you can't override with descending command. And your body starts to then waver more in those second 30 seconds. So taking it for a full 60 seconds is actually highly, highly valuable. You then are letting the patient feel and experience that their own balance for 60 seconds. When do you ever try and stand still for 60 seconds ever? And that in of itself is very illuminating for them. And then you get this point where when people have actually stepped off the scale, they think that, well, maybe the scale was moving. It's like, no, it wasn't moving. That was you. So now you get so many layers of value, of sort of awakening for people, that once they then step off that scale, they're very open and interested in anything you want to teach them. So, part of what we're trying to do is also to make sure that all that wonderful information that you as therapists have to impart on people, that the patients are receptive to it.
Yeah, you're opening the door for more information. And I mean,
Yeah.
we already use a lot of our tests, like our assessment parts, our treatment. Like a lot of the things that we'll say, let's say like we do, okay, I want you to stand for in tandem with your eyes open, then your eyes closed. And even though those are testing things that we can see, they're also treatment things that they can do on their own. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's really interesting about Zebrio, that you're not only providing the information about today your balance is this, but here's like something supportive to do something about it. And I think to me, that's a big plus,
Mhm.
because these days you can't just have data. You can't give data to a person and then not give them any like
Off you go.
solutions, ideas, or here you go. Like, your blood sugar's crazy. Bye bye. Nice to see you again. Right.
Right.
I mean, you need to provide something after. Data is only as good as what kind of interventions you give afterwards, or what recommendations or solutions they can do to
Yeah.
fix that. Right. So I
Yeah.
do think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we try and guide that process too. I mean, we have all sorts of training materials for therapists, for doctors, for individuals. So we're very much into education, and that includes insights into people's balance. And from there, we have actual care pathways that we also have some recommendations for. So, we work very well with others because this is a team sport. We talked about how
yeah.
complex falling is. You can't just have one, there's not one device, there's not one person that's going to suddenly fix all of this. So let's work together, and we definitely have um, useful information to help guide the process, to really try and help navigate some of that personalization.
Yeah, that's so important really, because, like we were talking about, if you have all these different factors, you need lots of different solutions. And it is it motivation? Is it like how you do the exercises, how it's delivered? I mean, it's just not there's just not one answer for everybody. So
Yeah,
I love that you brought that up. Like, let's talk a little bit about some of these consumer facing solutions out there that can solve
yeah.
pain points. And like, tell us a little bit more in detail too about like how Zebrio works exactly with clinicians or in the home.
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier about the 6 pillars of balance. That's a simplified version of the 21 plus risk factors that exist out there, and that's really to help narrows people's focus to to try and comprehend what can we possibly do. So sleep is one of them. Medications is another. You've got medical conditions; those are acute as well as chronic. So if you come down with the flu, we actually see people's balance dropping 24 hours before any symptoms show. Just
Huh.
anecdotally, that's something that
That's
we've
really
seen. So that's
fascinating.
fascinating. Then you've got obviously the exercise that counts for 2 pillars. You've got your more aerobic capacity, and then you have the more functional strength and capabilities. Did I get all of them? And the last one being mood. So mood is in fact a pillar. So across those 6 pillars, each one of those is an opportunity to delve into, other products for helping those particular lifestyle features, whether it is mood or anxiety. Obviously, there's many products out there, things like Calm, even. Let's listen to Matthew McConaughey doing some bedtime stories so that we can sleep a little bit better. There's each one of these pillars, there's opportunities to try and improve that particular piece. And with that piece, as you lift yourself up, um, is that going to be enough to help improve your balance and therefore reduce your risk of falling? So, and any day it can be different. So any day it could be that you had a bad night's sleep. So that's now hurting your balance and you want to do something about it. Another day it might be that, I've come down with a nasty cold and I need to do something about that. And so thinking along these 6 pillars really helps to guide through this messy field of things to really focus on one thing at a time rather than getting overwhelmed by all the 21 plus things that are out there. So
Yeah.
with Zebrio, we do provide just some basic lifestyle advice along those 6 pillars. And when there's an opportunity for an individual to test themselves, we actually combine those things of, oh, it seems like today you're dipping down on this particular thing. And oh, look, your balance has dropped down too. And we have balance explorations, which I particularly love, things that you can do with your patients, where you can have them test with their shoes on, their shoes off, maybe just with socks on. Um, it may be different. So if somebody's wearing a pair of very squishy shoes, I won't say the name of this brand, but we've actually seen a number of therapists actually wearing these shoes because they're runners, but they're terrible for your balance. And when people measure themselves, they see that. We also have explorations where you can just test while you touch the back of a chair, maybe with just a fingertip. And when you touch a surface, that's going to help stabilize you. And therefore your balance score is going to be better by about 30% even. Well, this is a great piece of learning for anything you want to teach about using a handrail or maybe their walker. Like, it's not about gripping on and holding on, just literally touching a surface can really enhance your balance. So there's just a few little things, but focusing on the 6 pillars really helps to focus people onto what's the one thing I can do today to try and make my balance better.
I love that you're decreasing the overwhelm from it. I mean, it's so easy to be lost in the details and the weeds and trying to figure out which one of these things is the most important thing. And, I would love to hear a little bit some of these stories that you have. Like what is that feedback that people have when they're using Zebrio?
Yeah. Well, so therapists, when a patient comes in, they'll often have them just hop on the scale just to get a baseline. Like, okay, where are they today? And you have to think of it a little bit like blood pressure. Blood pressure, if you go into a doctor's office and you're stressed, white coat stress,
Yeah.
your blood pressure can go up. But that doesn't mean that's an invalid test. It's just, that's you stressed. You often do tests where you're lying completely down or where you're sitting up so you have to think of balance in a similar way. Like, there is a range that you're working with. There's the everything is great, I am chill, I've had my morning walk, I feel great. And that might be your top. But maybe you've got your I'm feeling ill, I'm stressed, I didn't sleep very well, and that's sort of the bottom. And then you're looking at, well, how's that range changing? So some therapists love to do that little check-in just to just get a visual of, okay, they're on the lower end. Okay, something's up with them today. I'm going to talk to them about maybe their blood pressure. I'm sorry, their blood pressure or their blood sugar levels, or who knows. But you got that check-in, and then you've got all right, well, we've got our baseline, we've got our baseline range. What's happening? We've had them here for like 4 weeks. Are they improving? Are they staying the same? Are they bouncing up and down? And this one therapist actually chatted to me about it because she had this gentleman who was using a walker, terrible gait, like really shuffly, and from the look of it, high fall risk. Except he scored a 7 on our technology, and a 7 is green, low risk, low probability of falling. And so these two things, they weren't matching up in her mind. It was an incongruence. And so we just spoke a little bit, and I said, well, what we're measuring, and this goes back to any test you do, what is it telling you? And our test is telling you, how well is the body handling gravity? How well is it balancing? So this gentleman, his control system was very good because he scored well. Was there something else that was restricting his gait? And so I asked that question, and she said, yes, he's got awful ankle stiffness. So there you go. She said, I'm going to focus on that for a little while. And sure enough, that was the key that completely unlocked him, because he was physically very capable at balancing, even though you couldn't really tell from the gait. Unlocked that stiff ankle through the physical therapy. Those two together, he was often, in quotes, running. So,
I love it. You're identifying where to go next. Like when
yeah.
you're like, okay, wait, it looks fine. What's the problem? Where can I look for solutions in there?
hmm
That's
And
really fascinating.
we're not a magic technology. We didn't identify that. That was her expertise of like, okay, the test is telling me this. My
Right.
everything else I know about them is telling me that. What do we need to do?
And again, right, we're coming back to like that the test is a tool, a tech tool that is in your toolbox, and it really comes down to the clinician to kind of gather everything together, look at all
hmm
the data, look for the patterns, and where do I see patterns in there? Aha, I could try
Right.
this. And that still may be the wrong answer, but at least you know where to start and you can try that
Yeah.
and see if it works. If it doesn't, you start again. That's
Did it work? Did it work?
yeah,
Keep measuring, because if the goal is to improve balance, that's a meaningful balance, um, and reduce the risk of falling, then this is a way that you can see, okay, well, we did this thing. Has it changed the needle on that score? Oh, it didn't move it yet. Okay, but I know that that actually has increased their flexibility and their
right.
ability to do some other things. So functionally, we're getting more functional gain, but it's not enough to move the needle here. What else can we do? So it's actually giving this ability to go, well, maybe I can do more. Maybe I can help this patient with a different angle too. And so it can really help drive that treatment efficacy.
Have you ever tried, like, leaving, a Zebrio in a workplace? Like, just having somebody, "Hey, on your breaks, like, go check it out
Yeah,
and see what it is," because you get a huge range, right? I'm
you do.
thinking that everybody after 35, once you start getting, natural muscle loss, sarcopenia that happens
Yeah,
just naturally, right? You're going to have little changes, and I think just
sure.
curiosity-wise, people would be
Yeah,
interested in seeing what that number is, and
it
that
is.
would create competition.
It does. It really, really does. And it creates a shock to some people too, because most people are surprised by their score. And yeah, we have therapists and clinical staff, and we highly
Yeah.
encourage that they test themselves.
Yep.
Caregivers, because they usually are giving and not looking after themselves. And this is a great way to alert them to that. But you said something there. You said 35. So very close to the data that we've seen, which is that the average person in their 20s and 30s are scoring a 7, so that's in the green, 7 out of 10. And then it's the 40th decade. That's when this slippy slope starts, and it's a 10% drop in your ability to balance per decade. 10%
Which
per decade.
which doesn't surprise me at all, right? Because if you look at real data with it, what is it? You gain your body naturally, if you do everything the same, naturally gains 2 pounds of fat and loses half a pound of muscle every single year. Like, you
Yeah,
do the math on that after
yeah.
35, I mean, it's any wonder that we're all not just like big piles of jelly, It's crazy.
It is.
So,
The body
we're
is amazing, though. It is amazing. But I
it is
think
amazing.
Well, and so what are we left with when we're trying to identify who's at risk and who needs help? Very often, people and clinicians will just lead into age. And age is a risk factor, but just because you're 80 doesn't mean you're at risk for falling. And so that ageism is actually a bit of a barrier to connecting with patients. So if we're constantly saying, well, you are 85, so that means you're going to be at risk for falling, then you haven't made them feel very good. They can't do anything about the age. So let's take something that has nothing to do with age, nothing to do with any of those other risk factors. Let's just take your ability to balance. Let's look at your ability. And that really opens up individuals in terms of the ability to connect with them, to make them feel heard, so that you're not just judging them based on something else that they have zero control over.
This has been such a fascinating discussion. And just to wrap things up, I wanted to ask, what are your top 3 takeaways that clinicians could use to guide their practice for tomorrow?
Yeah. Okay. Top three. The first one would be measurement. Really thinking about what does every test give you, and is that really of value? You could measure balance on some different technologies that tell you if you're leaning one way or the other. Is that really valuable for the ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve? So measurement is key, and objective measurement is obviously king in all of this. So trying to find the best way to measure the things that you need to drive that care plan forwards. So that's number one, and that's a big one. And number two, I suppose, is linked to that because you've got the ability to optimize care and have that kind of biofeedback process from a good quality measurement, and being willing to look at something, all the different factors that can influence that measurement to really help drive a better treatment efficacy. I think that's my number two. And then the third one, oh yes, empowerment. Something that enables empowerment of the patient so that they're as involved in this process as much as you are. They have agency in the process. They have motivation. They understand from a very deep level, not just because someone's just told them, but they feel they have this connection to what it is that you're trying to lead them through, and that empowerment piece. I mean, that's everything to really drive outcomes.
Yeah, so important. So important. I love all of those things because they're just tools for us to be able to do our jobs better.
Yeah.
So how can people reach you if they want to learn more or they have other questions?
Well, I mean, you can always go to our website, zibrio.com. So zibrio.com. And then if you have specific questions for me, you can always reach out directly to me. I always love to chat, and you can hopefully see my name here on the recording, but Katey, Katey, at zibrio.com. That's a way that you can contact me.
I love it. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you to Dr. Forth for the insight and takeaways related to fall prevention strategies. We'd like to note that this episode is intended for educational purposes only and does not represent an endorsement of any specific company or product. We reference types of solutions, but these are to inform clinical decision-making and not to promote specific brands. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Innovative Aging by MedBridge. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, your favorite podcast platform, or listen directly at medbridge.com. If you'd like to earn continuing education credit and access bonus resources from this episode, just log in to your MedBridge account and search for the show title to get started. And we'd love to hear from you. If there's a topic you want us to explore or a guest you'd love to hear from, reach out via Instagram or email us at podcasts@medbridge.com. Thank you for the work you do and for joining us as we explore what it truly means to age in place. See you next time.